What if I told you the battle for Ukraine isn't just about land, borders, or even Europe? It's the front line in a global power struggle that could decide the next century. While Russia's tanks roll and missiles fly, China quietly watches, hoping the U.S. stays bogged down long enough for Beijing to expand its influence unchecked. NATO's future, America's credibility, and the stability of the world order all hang in the balance. Because if Ukraine falls, it's not just their loss, it's a signal to every authoritarian regime that the West's will can be broken. When Mitch McConnell pressed Pete Hegseth to name the aggressor in the Russia-Ukraine war, there was no room to dance around the truth.
Mr. Secretary, probably won't surprise you, but I'm going to start with Ukraine. And I'm going to ask you a series of questions, but I don't want you to linger on any one of them, but answer the series of questions in one answer. Number one, who's the aggressor and who's the victim in the conflict?
Russia's the aggressor.
Which side do you want to win?
As we've said time and time again, this president is committed to peace in that conflict. Ultimately, peace serves our national interests, and we think the interest of both parties, even if that outcome will not be preferable to many in this room and many in our country.
Which side is President Xi pulling for?
Well, as was stated by both of you, we obviously understand, unfortunately, under this administration and the policy, under the previous administration and the policies they pursued, it has driven Russia and China closer together. So there's no doubt that China would prefer that Vladimir Putin have a good outcome. But it would also prefer a prolonged conflict that would keep us and other countries tied down and incapable of paying attention to the malign influence of China elsewhere.
One thing I'm sure we agree on is we don't want a headline at the end of this conflict that says Russia wins and America loses. And given the fact that all of our adversaries are communicating with each other, that's extremely important if we're going to continue to play the role in the world that the vast majority of members of Congress think we should still play, particularly now that our adversaries are more significant than they have been since the Berlin Wall came down. With regard to the money we're spending, what's the return on the investment of our security assistance to Ukraine?
Senator, I would just say, given the approach of President Trump, that's not the headline, regardless. The previous administration, under the Obama administration, Crimea was invaded, and we gave them blankets. Under President Trump, during his first term, he gave the Ukrainians javelins, and the Russians did not invade. Under Biden, the Russians did invade, and aid was slow-walked incompletely, and as a result, it became a gridlock. Thankfully, the javelins that President Trump provided actually stalled the Russian advance. Now we are at a place where Vladimir Putin knows that President Trump is strong. He knows his word means something, and as a result, a negotiated peace in Ukraine makes America look strong, makes us look like we understand the state of the world and where we want to be focused, even if we understand that Russia's the aggressor, and we applaud the efforts of the Ukrainians. There is a moment where you have to recognize what exists on the battlefield and that a better outcome is a negotiated peace to stop the killing and stop the slaughter. And our budget reflects that perspective.
If I may, Mr. Secretary, I'm not here to defend the previous administration. They were completely inadequate anyway. And I think you could make an argument that the precipitous withdrawal from Afghanistan was like a green light to Putin. But we are where we are. And beating up the past is not a plan for going forward to the future. What has benefited the United States, I think you would agree, 38 different states have produced weapons or parts of weapons out of the money that the Ukraine supplemental package passed last year. 2 new members of NATO now increased spending by virtually all of our NATO allies, which President Trump deserves part of the credit for encouraging that. Vladimir Putin probably guaranteed it would happen. Everybody seems to be moving in the right direction. And then they look at us and wonder whether we're in the midst of brokering what appears to be allowing the Russians to define victory. I think victory is defined by the people that have to live there, the Ukrainians. And I don't think they're going to ever conclude that victory means basically adopting the Russian views on all this. So what do you make of what the Russians are up to? They don't seem to me to be too interested in talking. We want to talk. They seem to be increasing the war. What's your take on that?
Well, no one's adopting views, sir. I would say that the budget reflects the reality that Europe needs to step up more for the defense of its own continent. And President Trump deserves the credit for that. In his first term in this term, we're about to go to The Hague, where we hope most European NATO countries are going to commit to a 3.5, 1.5 total of 5% defense spending, which was inconceivable before President Trump. And he has set the standard that America can't be everywhere all the time for everybody. And if you're a European country, you cannot freeload off of the United States in perpetuity. You are our allies and our friends, and we will stand with you, but you need to stand up in times of peace and in times of war. And this budget reflects that it's long overdue Europe does more, and that we be strategic about the outcome there, even if it's not preferable for all parties, so that our focus can turn, as was mentioned by everybody thus far, to the Indo-Pacific and our pacing threat, while Europe ensures peace on that continent. And so the budget is meant to reflect that reality. It includes hard choices. But that's been one of the things we're trying to do in this Defense Department, is make some of those hard choices alongside President Trump.
Yeah, the only thing I would say to conclude this before turning over to Senator Coons, relitigating the past, it seems to me, is not helpful. I didn't defend any of the submissions, budget submissions that the previous administration made. I had a lot of the same complaints about how they were handling this. I want to avoid that for the future. And it seems to me pretty obvious that America's reputation is on the line. Will we defend democratic allies against authoritarian aggressors? That's the international concern that I have about this. And I think a number of my members share that view.
Russia is the aggressor. That admission might seem obvious, but in geopolitics, clarity matters. Without it, alliances weaken, and hesitation creeps in. Naming the aggressor isn't just about pointing fingers, it's about defining the stakes, and those stakes reach far beyond Eastern Europe. Every word, every stance the United States takes is a signal to the rest of the world, especially to powers like China, who see opportunity in distraction. Beijing doesn't need to fire a shot in Europe. All it needs is for the U.S. to be tied up here, leaving the Indo-Pacific wide open for its influence to spread. Supporting Ukraine isn't charity, it's calculated self-defense. Letting Russia steamroll its neighbor without consequence would embolden authoritarian regimes everywhere. From Moscow to Beijing to Tehran, leaders are watching to see whether the U.S. will stand firm or retreat. If Russia wins, it's not just Ukraine that loses, it's the credibility of the free world. This is about defending values, maintaining global stability, and safeguarding America's own strategic interests. A loss here would be a win for every regime that thrives on crushing dissent and redrawing borders by force. That's why the conversation about cost is so important and so often misunderstood. Critics point to billions in aid and ask, what's the return? But look closely, and the return is clear. Under the Trump administration, Ukraine received Javelin missiles, shoulder-fired tank killers that changed the game in the war's early days. A few thousand U.S.-made weapons helped stall one of the largest militaries in the world. That's not theory, it's battlefield fact. Every Russian tank destroyed by a Javelin is one less threat to NATO's doorstep. It's proof that American support isn't just symbolic, it's lethal, effective, and sends a chilling message to any adversary thinking about testing U.S. resolve. But firepower is only part of the equation. There comes a point where leaders have to weigh battlefield realities against the cost in human lives. A negotiated peace isn't surrender, it's strategic dominance if done right. Imagine the U.S. helping broker a ceasefire that ends the slaughter, preserves Ukrainian sovereignty, and leaves Russia without the victory it craves. That's more than military might, that's diplomatic mastery. And while the war has been brutal, it's also delivered strategic wins for the U.S. and its allies. 38 states across America producing defense goods, keeping jobs and industries thriving. NATO stronger than ever with increased defense spending from almost every member, and the addition of Sweden and Finland, boosting security in one of the world's most sensitive regions. Still, America can't carry this burden alone. McConnell's message to Europe was blunt: the era of freeloading is over. NATO allies must meet defense spending targets of 3.5%, even 5% of GDP, if freedom is truly a shared value. That means no more relying on U.S. firepower, while contributing the bare minimum. Shared security demands shared sacrifice. If Europe won't rise to the challenge, the entire balance of global stability begins to tilt, giving adversaries exactly what they want: a fractured West. Meanwhile, Russia's endgame is crystal clear. They're not looking for compromise, they want to dictate the terms of victory on their own timetable. The longer the West hesitates, the more ground Moscow gains, not just on the battlefield, but in shaping the narrative of what victory means. Letting Russia set those terms would undermine every rule and agreement that has kept global conflict in check since World War II. That's why NATO unity and European commitment aren't optional, they're essential. At the core of all this is America's credibility. Will the U.S. defend its democratic allies when they're under attack, or will it choose convenience over commitment? Abandoning Ukraine would send a dangerous message that America's promises are negotiable, its word conditional, and make no mistake, adversaries are watching. From Moscow to Beijing, they're calculating how far they can push before the U.S. blinks. Standing firm now sends a clear message: democracy matters everywhere, and America will defend it, not just when it's easy, but when it's hard. Defending freedom abroad isn't just about protecting others, it reinforces America's own security at home. If authoritarian powers succeed overseas, they'll be emboldened to undermine U.S. influence everywhere, from trade routes to cyber networks to diplomatic tables. The fight for Ukraine is about keeping the rules of the international order intact, making sure smaller nations aren't crushed by larger bullies, and ensuring that the values of freedom and self-determination remain more than just slogans. So the question becomes, will the U.S. lead as the global power it claims to be, rallying allies and confronting aggression head-on, or will it step back, opening the door for a new world order shaped by autocrats? The choice isn't just about Ukraine, it's about the kind of world we leave for the next generation. What do you think? Is America's role in Ukraine a smart investment in security and stability, or a costly distraction? Let us know in the comments, and if you found this video eye-opening, make sure to subscribe. The next one dives into an even more controversial front in the global power struggle. You won't want to miss it.